Hello again, and welcome to this edition of Midwest Ag This Week. I'm Stu Ellis. I'll take care of today's chores for you. Prepare for a surprise about COVID and meat packing plants. You've not heard this before. We're turning the corner into March and planting early soybeans. We'll share Greg Sauter's thoughts on that. We'll talk about the employment challenges in agriculture, and you'll meet the new president of the Illinois Pork Producers. We'll wrap up Grain Bin Safety Week. Ask your family to join you for that. All that in 30 years of soybean research right now.
Welcome to Midwest Ag This Week with host Stu Ellis.
Well, buckle your seatbelt. The meatpacking industry suffered a virtual spanking during the outset of the COVID epidemic. Packing lines shut down, livestock prices plummeted, hogs and cattle were not being accepted for slaughter. Illinois Pork Producers hired Dr. Jim Lowe in the U of I College of Veterinary Medicine to find out the root cause of the problem. And here's what he found out.
The pork packing and really the pork industry and the beef industry are really relying on our packing plants operating every day, and they take people. And so we knew that people were scared in the packing plants, and we knew that there was a potential for virus transmission in the packing plants. And so I do infectious disease. I normally do four-legged infectious disease, but disease is disease, and we've had relationships with packing plants. And so between Illinois Pork and the packing plants, they said, can you help us think about what we're going to do for COVID control in the plants? And it was a hot topic that we thought the virus was going to transmit inside the plants.
They used the COVID shield test developed at the U of I.
The less talked about part is we used that test to look at the environment in the packing plant. So we now had a way to know if the mitigation measures we were using, wiping up, extra cleaning, air filtering, were actually eliminating COVID from the environment. So we ended up with 7 packing plants that we were sampling in. So we'd sample every week, and we'd sample after they clean, before they clean. We sampled surfaces, we sampled the air. And kind of really shockingly, all the way until late fall, after Thanksgiving of 2020, we didn't find any virus. We had lots of people not coming to work in the packing plant, but there wasn't virus in the packing plant. So the packing plants just jumped, bent over backwards and built new systems to control disease. They built new lunchrooms. So they had, instead of one big lunchroom, they had 4 giant lunchrooms. They put up dividers between people. Everybody started wearing a mask. The masks were a thing in the packing plant long before they were a thing at Walmart. So when we started doing this, people looked at me really funny and they said, Jim, you're going to a packing plant? And I said, yeah, we're going to a packing plant. Aren't you scared? I said, not as scared as I was when I went to Walmart afterwards. So, and I'm not picking on Walmart, right? But I went to the grocery, right? And you're like, hey, there was nothing going on there. And you go in these packing plants and it was super secure. And they're cleaning all the time. And they're good at this because they do it for food safety. So this wasn't, they're like, oh, we know how to do this. We just do what we do. Yep, you do what you do.
A real surprise there. Greg Sauter, 360 Yield Center, has invented a lot in his effort to raise bigger crops, but his message was a bit different this past week, speaking to a big crowd at Bottom Line Solutions over in Morton. Instead of promoting a new planter attachment, Sauter was strongly endorsing early soybean planting, and particularly for farms with access to only one planter.
Well, let's just give an example. Let's say we have a farm of 1,700 acres and they got a 16-row planter. So they're pushing a little bit, but yet at the same time, that's the only planter they have. And so they have 800 acres of corn and 850 of each, let's just say. What should they do? Well, for me, I've watched early bean planting for now 5 years, and it's real. That's 10 to 15 bushel is a real number. Can it freeze off? Absolutely. Can it get snow on them? Sure. They're very tough. You can lose some stand and still maintain it. So for me, I would plant beans first. For sure the first week. If ground is fit, and then for Tremont, Illinois, if it's April 1st, I'm going to be in and going. We know that early planting increases flowering, which increases pod set. So lower pods, we're talking pods down right on the ground. So that family of one planter is going to have to make a decision. Are we going to plant corn this week or are we going to plant beans? The first week out, we're going to plant beans. We're going to add starter right now to that 16-row corn planter because starter increases maturity by 7 days. So now if the neighborhood starts on April 15th and you're planting beans and they're planting corn, And you get done that week, and the next week you start corn, guess what? You're no further behind than they are, because that 7 days of additional growth, faster maturity is real. So I would take the yield on the beans, and I don't think we've hurt the corn a bit.
And those beans, is there a temperature that you will not plant a bean at?
Well,
A soil temperature?
I mean, as long as you're telling me we're seed treating, don't forget that. And I mean, we're using a 5-way seed treatment, so we'll have a levo on. We're always worried about sudden death, but I have no problem in a 48 to 50 degree soil putting them in, because we know it's going to warm up, but we want to get them in. And as long as we're treated and we have an insecticide, a fungicide, all the magic on the seed, I feel pretty comfortable. We've done it for years. Those bushel increases are real.
He's waiting till April 1st. There's going to be some boys around here that are going to put them in the ground. I have a feeling the end of this next week.
It's actually quite possible, just because of the warmth that we have expected, and also the fact that we have not much in the way of any precipitation. So a lot of sunshine will help to warm up the ground.
That's right.
Yeah. So to get rid of the snow that we do have on the ground, we got a little bit of it with that last system that we did have on through. So you'll notice that we have some pretty light amounts across our state, and also for a lot of the Great Lakes. Over in the Northeast, though, they've got another big system moving through there, so they're getting more in the way of some higher amounts, but really not that much in the way of some snow on the ground currently. We melted a lot of it with our previous 2 systems for February with all the mild temperatures. That little bit that we did add on from the other day will be gone by the weekend, and our chances for precipitation are extremely low. In fact, we're probably going to have to wait until potentially the end of next week, by around Friday or so. Our future track is going to show that we do have high pressure, at least situated somewhere nearby for pretty much the entire work week. So a very quiet forecast with a lot of sunshine expected, and temperatures that'll be slowly warming up every single day too. We're going to be in the 30s and 40s this weekend. We'll eventually be able to get into the 50s by the time we get to the end of the week into early next weekend. So it is going to be a warm up there. Maybe looking at another system by the end of the week, but that is 7 days out. As of right now, we're not really calling for much in the way of any precipitation for the next 7 days either. And our drought monitor, you'll notice that the state of Illinois and also Indiana looks pretty good right now. I've kind of chipped away at that one area of drought in the northwestern corner of the state that's kind of receded a little bit because of the snow that we have seen in the region. But again, it is going to be a very quiet forecast with, like I said, warming temperatures. We're going to be looking at temperatures, like I said, in the 30s and 40s for the weekend. By the time we get towards the middle to end of the week, temperatures will likely be pushing 50s, maybe even close to 60 degrees in a few spots. And again, combined with all that sunshine, Stu, we're probably going to be able to see these ground temperatures warm up here pretty nicely. So a quiet week, no precipitation, definitely no snow in our forecast. So things could be looking good for, again, some of those guys getting in there just a little bit on the early side.
That's right. We'll watch for that. Agriculture needs you. Stay right there.
Welcome back to Midwest Ag This Week.
Farmers and agribusiness have all posted help wanted signs. Many jobs open and few, if any, applicants. Is the labor shortage in agriculture developing like the rest of industry? Many people not wanting to return to work after COVID? Jim Fleming knows. He's an agriculture headhunter for AgriSearch down at Arthur.
No, I don't believe that it has happened like that. We were in a shortage of people prior to COVID. Okay. I think the thing you have to keep in mind is that ag people think differently. Okay. It's not the fact that the ag people aren't wanting to work. It's the fact there's not enough of them. The universities are graduating tons of students. The job demand exceeds those numbers. Okay. And that's where the challenge is. The challenge is in ag, and I think this is why we're seeing such a expedited movement towards autonomous vehicles and, Case IH and John Deere with autonomous tractors and the experiments that they're doing, is because we don't have enough people. You have to get product applied in a timely manner. The ag retailers, when I say ag retail, I'm talking your Nutrients, your Helenas, your Grow Marks, those types of companies. cannot get it applied in a timely manner. They don't have enough people. So there's a shortage of those hands-on people. There's a shortage of hands-on people in the grain industry, in the processing industry. It's the hands-on candidates that we're having a hard time finding. So yes, COVID had an impact, but not like it did in other aspects of the industry, primarily because the crop still has to get planted. It still has to be harvested. It still has to be processed.
Agriculture needs you. Don't go away. This past week, the grain industry observed Grain Bin Safety Week, and at the National Farm Machinery Show, I had the chance to visit with a number of grain bin manufacturers to get their suggestions for safety and to avoid fatal engulfments.
You know, lockout, tag-out systems whenever you get inside a bin.
What do you mean lockout, tag?
Lockout, tag-out is you have a little clamp that goes over any power box, and you have your name associated with a padlock, and so you'll put your name on that padlock when you go in there. So if there's multiple people in there, you know, there's 3 people that go in there, there'll be 3 different padlocks on there, and you cannot unlock that until all 3 padlocks are off. That way you know everybody's out of the bin, everybody's in the safe clear zone before power is restored, and you know any sweeps or augers are started back up.
Okay. That tying somebody off, how does that happen?
We provide an eye bolt that mounts to the eave of every grain bin right beside the ladder. So if I've got a safety harness on and a rope, my lifeline they call that, I can thread it through that eye bolt and I'm connected to the sidewall, then that'll keep me from getting down into the grain.
When the grain is in a position where it's either out of condition or you're moving grain in the bin, you should just simply never be in there. And if you need help or support around that, then we'd recommend that you contact one of our local dealers to help with that scenario.
How would they resolve a problem with grain that's just not flowing?
Yeah, good question. So if grain's out of condition, it will have a tendency to just you know, bank up steeply, and then you have an avalanche risk, and that's frankly where a lot of people get in trouble in a grain bin. But they can pursue it through different means, maybe some other equipment in through the bin that's a more a safe approach than just trying to get in there and move the grain yourself.
You know, for the kids, stay out of the bin. The farmers, you know, and the wives, preach to your husbands, stay out of that bin. And the other thing is a buddy system. Always have someone there that you have somebody that's going to be your double check, if you will.
There's grain in that bin, Chip.
Expensive grain.
Expensive grain, that's right. How do you spell volatility with a capital V, I have a feeling? We've seen 2 days that are just unbelievably volatile.
Pretty historic, and you know, almost $1.80 range in beans over 2 days' time, less than 2 full days. 60 cents in corn. Went to some historic levels in here. Obviously, a lot of geopolitical uncertainty with the Russia-Ukraine situation. You know, a lot of other stuff going on as well. Still uncertainty as to what the final crop size in Brazil is going to be. They did receive some beneficial rainfall down there, Stu, this week. Probably most beneficial to Argentina. That still probably matters for their bean crop. And in southern Brazil, that rain probably helped their, you know, newly planted second crop corn that's in the ground. I don't think they're finished planting yet, but certainly that was an added you know, negative thing here at the end of the week. But once we got the selling pressure started, it just really fed on itself. I think this is something, unfortunately, we're going to have to come to expect. And I think that you're going to see even bigger swings before it's all said and done. Still, the market acts like it's an all clear out of, you know, Russia, Ukraine. And, you know, it's a long weekend and this thing changes by the minute. So, you know, once we come in Sunday night, Monday, all bets are off. So this volatility is really getting gut wrenching, Stu.
So what does a farmer do about that that's still got some old crop and maybe want to sell some of the new crop?
Yeah, you know, I obviously bombs away here as far as some new crop selling goes. We were sellers, as were a lot of other people, you know, yesterday during the limit up or nearly limit up move. You know, I think one thing is to get comfortable with all the tools out there, including options. If there was ever a market set up to use options to manage risk, it is right now. So, that would be one thing I'd recommend is, just get comfortable with puts and calls, and they're very good tools to help you manage risk in markets like this. Also, crop insurance is going to be critical to make the right crop insurance decision this year as well, Stu.
All right, Chip, thank you. We'll see you in a few weeks.
Thanks.
All of a sudden, there's been a huge flock of black swans floating by. We'll be back with 30 years of diligence right after this. With the help of Illinois and national soybean checkoff funding, U of I soybean breeder Brian Deers has identified a gene in soybeans that will increase protein in the soybean meal, making it more valuable for soybean growers. We caught up with him in a U of I greenhouse, where he's now working to boost the yield of that new variety.
So it's been a long journey. So it was a gene location that I identified back when I was a grad student over 30 years ago. And so it's been a long journey to finally identify the actual gene itself. So what it is it's the gene that's been identified in soybeans that has the largest impact on protein of any gene, so far identified. So when we've tracked down the gene, we assumed that we'd find a gene that had something to do with nitrogen metabolism or something like that, because that would make sense for increasing protein. But when we finally identified the gene and looked at the predicted function of it, it seems to have something to do with circadian function in the plant. So meaning that it has to do with the detection of daylight and kind of triggers different responses in the plant based on that.
Now, but really what it does is create more protein within that meal.
That's right. So the gene, when we compare plants that have the gene or don't have the gene, it increases protein about 2%. So it increases it from about 40% to about 42%, which doesn't seem like a lot, but when we compare it to other genes, they usually have a much smaller effect.
Now, 2% will allow, a boost in the recoverable protein in a lot of soybean then?
That's right, it could if it was deployed in varieties. The issue that we've run into is that when we actually put this gene into high-yielding varieties, we get a reduction in yield, which has been a frustration because we can't just take the gene, put it in a high-yielding variety, get the extra protein, but not have to sacrifice yield.
Okay, so can we find a happy medium here then?
That's what we're hoping, is that by actually identifying the gene and understanding how the gene works, perhaps we can find other forms of the gene that can increase the protein without such a large yield reduction, or maybe we can identify ways to modify the gene such that it can give us a boost in protein but not the reduction in yield.
Congratulations to Dr. Brian Deers for his discovery. Coming up, standing tall in the pork industry. A couple of weeks back, we featured the Illinois Pork Producers Association on this program. But as of this past week, IPPA has a new president. We'd like to introduce you to Thomas Titus, part of a long-time family pork operation who has concerns about labor and concerns about a debilitating disease that's threatening pork producers.
So I feel very fortunate to help lead this organization. We have a great staff and an incredible board and an incredible executive board within Illinois Pork Producers Association. So just feel very fortunate to be part of this. And I mean, I, along with my wife Brianne and our two young daughters, Reagan, who is 10, and Lakin, who is 7, we farm with my wife's family in rural Logan County, where we raise pigs, along with her father, David, and Lisa Conradi, and her brother-in-law, Brett and Janet Conradi, raise corn and soybeans there. And so, I mean, we're a multi-generational family farm that has a passion for the pork industry. So, I mean, I'm extremely excited about the opportunity to help lead this organization. And we have a great opportunity this next year with our Pork Power program, we're beginning to encroach upon $1 million, $1 million pound donation level of donations, which is just incredible. And so, I mean, we begin to work with those local food banks and regional food banks and things like that to get ground pork into people's hands that may have not have had it before. And so, at that same time, I mean, we're increasing a level of market share or market base as well, because we're working with these families that are purchasing ground pork, learning how to utilize this product in a completely different way. And I mean, it's something that, of course, at our own home plate we utilize all the time because we have it readily available. But sometimes it's a relatively new protein for some of these families that they're utilizing. And so I think the Pork Power program is just a crucial key and part of our commitment in giving back to communities.
Some of the challenges that pork producers are facing at this time.
I mean, from a standpoint of foreign animal disease, that's something that's always a big concern. I mean, African swine fever has ravaged a number of countries throughout the world, and you begin to think how far it is away. I mean, it's about the distance from Illinois to Florida at this point in time, and so it's right in our back door in the Dominican Republic. And so we have to be very cautious about from a biosecurity standpoint, and also, I mean, at our ports of entry, and making sure that we are doing all the right things to safeguard what we raise here in the United States. I mean, some other challenges that we have. I mean, labor is always a challenge. It's really high on the list. I mean, it seems like sometimes it's getting a little bit better, but at the same time, I mean, finding good quality employees that enjoy working with animals is always going to be harder. But fortunately, our kids are starting to get a little bit older, and they're becoming very, very good help out on the farm.
Great leader, great thinker. Look forward to visiting his pork operation not far from Elkhart. Thomas Titus, the new president of Illinois Pork Producers. Well, that concludes this edition of Midwest Ag This Week. Thank you for joining us. Share some of the information you heard with some of your farming colleagues. We'll see you right back here again at this time next week. I'm Stu Ellis.